Hello, chess friends, and welcome to Jozarov Chess Channel, and welcome to a spectacular match that has been played a couple of days ago on chess.com. Welcome to the spectacular match between Stockfish 17 and the Tor Chess Engine in a crazy 100 match that they played in a really rare format, because Stockfish and Torch played 100 games in a format of 3 hours on the clock plus 2 seconds increment per move, which is really a crazy format, especially when it comes to top engines. I think having much time means, of course, so much for them, that because they can really calculate some lines in a deeper way. And in this 100 match, Stockfish really dominated over Torch with a clear result. After 100 games they played, Stockfish gained 57.5 points against Torch, so 42.5 points in this epic match, which is really crazy. And I've analyzed now one game, which is really crazy, I would say, for sure, in a lion's jaw of the Perch defense. Really amazing game in which Stockfish will demonstrate its, first of all, I would say, great positional but also defensive skills, but then again it's brutal attacking skills in the middle game stage. So put your seatbelts on and enjoy again in a wild game in AI chess. So with white, the fish opened here with move e4, d6 here by Torch, the Perth defense, d4, knight to f6. We have now the move f3, which is now the so-called lion's jaw against the lion's defense. We have now the move c6, and now the game transposes basically into similar ideas like in the same-ish variation of the king against the king's Indian defense, but it's of course not the king's Indian because black didn't play the move g6, bishop to g7, but with similar, I would say, strategic ideas now for white and for black. We have now the move e5, knight to e2, bishop to e7, bishop to e3 calcing, and now queen to d2, here played by Stockfish in some lines, of course, preparing knight to c3 and then queenside calcing. We have now rook to e8, knight to c3, which becomes now a theoretical novelty. This move has not been played so far in chess history. It's a little bit surprise for me. Let me check out the database. In chess history, the move d5 has been played in one game that I see here so far. Maybe in some other databases you will finally find for sure here the move knight to c3, which is in my opinion nothing spectacular, still where I think in common setups, in common theory, in common moves that I think would many of us would play for sure. So here bishop to f8 played by Torch, and I will have to mention this move bishop to f8 was now the last move that was pre-arranged by the organizer. Let's repeat again, in this AI tournament the engines have to play pre-arranged openings. If they would play some openings of their own, most of the games, believe me or not, would for sure end with the drawish result, which we of course don't want to see. So the developers, the organizers, are basically testing here the engines in some rare openings, in some wild opening, in some maybe tricky gambits and similar stuff. But of course both engines have to play the opening from white's perspective, but then also again with the black pieces. So here from move bishop to f8, Stockfish continues now with the normal progression here with the move d5. Stockfish gains now the main space advantage in the center of the board. h5, queenside calcing, knight to a6, king to b1, tiny little improvement here by the fish of the king, and now bishop to d7, bishop to g5. Very tricky stuff. Stockfish wants now to put more pressure against this loose pawn on h5, knight to c5. We have now to move h4 with the idea then later maybe to hit the flanks with the move g4, bishop to e7. Now comes b4 here by Stockfish, and see Stockfish has an expansion in the center of the board, it has an expansion on the king side. Now Stockfish is even attacking the queen side, but with the downside, of course, that the pawn on b4 becomes now vulnerable piece here for white. Now after knight to a6 attacking the pawn, Stockfish connects now the pawn on the a file to the b pawn, and now after move c5, what Torch is trying here is somehow to open the files against the white's king, because we have again this opposite side attack game where the kings are on opposite sides. So basically you're trying to open files, open diagonals against your opponent's kings. But of course Stockfish is not allowing it. Passes through. We have now knight to c7, and now comes this idea, knight to g3 with the threat of bishop takes f6 and then picking up the pawn on h5. We have now g6, that's why here by Torch, protecting now the pawn, and now Stockfish plays an interesting move, plays now a calm king to a2, get simply out of the potential attack on the b file. And you see really the importance of this move after a couple more moves. King to a2, in my opinion, first brilliant move here by the fish, anticipating the possibility that there could be maybe an attack through the b file here by black. And torch continues now with knight to h7, hitting the bishop. Stockfish trades now the bishops and plays now a calm bishop to d3. The main goal now by the fish is somehow to get the g4. We want to play here from white's perspective to move g4. We want to break the position here on the king side. a6 by torch. Stockfish continues, of course, with the move b6, not allowing any files to be open. If you play something like this, then the rook is coming into the game, and I guarantee you'll not have fun on the a file here for sure. So that's why b6, passing through, attacking now the knight. Knight to e8. Now the pawn is hanging. Stockfish protects it now, and now a5 here by torch. Torch is trying now finally to grab the loose pawn on b6. But the interesting part is now Stockfish says, show me what you got, go for the b4, b6 pawn. I'll just continue my pressure here with the idea to put with the idea g4. G4 is now, as I said, the main attacking goal here for white. Now comes rook to a6, and Stockfish continues with knight to e3. Who cares if you grab the pawn on b6? We have now knight to g7. Pardon me. And now g4 anyway here by Stockfish. Here we have rook takes b6, and now a brilliant idea, rook to g1. And Torch had so much effort, gave so much effort to just grab this pawn on b6, but look at this. This attack again by black is so splashed. Okay, you have occupied now the b file, but you don't have, I would say, any support of your rook. The rook is lonely in this attack against the king, and Stockfish still has a great control of the b5 square. The b5 square is, I think, very important because in order to break the position somehow on the queen side, you will have to play the move b5. And so far, with the bishop here on d3, with the knight, with the pawn on c4, no way that the position is cracking here around the square. So that's why Stockfish gave up a pawn, but now look at this. The whole coordination, I think, is towards the king side, where Stockfish has placed many pieces, especially the rooks on the h and g file. Now Stockfish is having enormous pressure on the king side. We have now rook to e8 here by torch. Stockfish continues now with rook to g2, wants to now double up rooks on the g file. We have queen to f6, rook to g1, king to h8, and now knight to e2. New reposition of the knight, including now the last piece, I would say, into the attack. Now all the pieces are storming to Torch defense. Rook to a6, a desperate try, I would say, here by Torch to somehow trying to play the move b5, but now knight to g3. Look at this. The position gets more and more tense. The Stockfish is now finally rerouting, really, the last attacker on the king side. We have now rook to f8, and now bishop to c2. Bishop to c2, a really interesting move, which I thought was maybe even a tiny little inaccuracy, because now finally b5 could happen, but Stockfish has everything under control. Stockfish says this move, bishop to c2, is just a tricky idea to deflect this bishop from this diagonal. Look at this. If you play b5 immediately, then after c takes b5, bishop to b5. The issue is now after g takes h5, knight to h5, knight to h5. The issue is after rook to g7, maybe queen takes g7 and similar stuff. You will give up maybe the queen for both of those rooks. The issue is that now white has access to the f5 square. Notice that the bishop on d7 is always protecting the f5 square. Really amazing stuff. This tricky idea, bishop to c2, which could have gone wrong here already for Torch, maybe with the move b5. So that's why Torch plays it calmly here with rook to a8, and now knight to f5 here by Stockfish. This is just an epic move here. G takes h5 here. If you ask yourself the question, the line that we have previously discussed is not working, although you're getting something here, maybe with the rook to g7. Now finally the bishop on d7 is protecting, and now after bishop to f5, I would say a defendable position for black. But now look at this, knight from e to f5, really crazy move. That move splits, opens now black's defense. Really amazing stuff. Let's see what happens if you play here g takes f5. If you grab now the knight, then e takes f5 simply connects now all of these pawns. The pawn storm is coming here on the king side. You're trying maybe, I don't know, to play counter-attack with b5 here, but it's too slow. Look at this, knight to e4. Then we play f6. You can maybe, I don't know, play knight to e7. Then we pick up this one, get the queen into the game. Many lines are possible. I've just analyzed one line. Look at this, knight to f6, and then you can get the checkmate. But the issue is that the the pawns are rolling here. There's simply no good defense. You can, of course, give some material back by giving up some pieces for some pawns, but still the g-file attack, I think, is too much to handle here. The queen is very active. The coordination of white pieces, as I mentioned, is really, really great. So even if you give up back material, it's game over, I would say, here for black. So that's why after knight from e to f5, again, a calm choice here by Torch. Torch continues the pressure with the move a4, but now g5. Stockfish plays now again a new attack against the queen. We have queen to d8. Stockfish plays now f4. If you play again g takes f5, this is not working. You could maybe even try, I don't know, e takes f4, but then the queen is coming, and even if you try, I don't know, to step back, you will with the knight. Look at this. This one is hanging. Even if you try f6 here, then g6 is coming. You're trying maybe to do something like this, but now knight to e4, knight takes, and then just also line that I've analyzed at home. You can get even checkmate. But the issue is that you cannot really take here the piece on f5 in any lines. Stockfish has prepared this attack really in a great way. So that's why for f4, b5, finally here by Torch trying to create some counterplay on the queen side, but I think again it's a little bit too slow. Look at this. Knight to g7, king takes g7, and now again knight to f5. Really crazy sequence here. Let's see again what happens if you play g takes f5. If you play g takes f5, then obviously e takes f5, and again the pawns are rolling. You can just, I don't know, try to open the position further here, but then when the queen is coming, you have to, I think, in one moment even go for the trades of queens. But the issue is again after queen to e5, that's now one line again that I analyzed at home. You cannot recover. You cannot. If you try, of course, to play some moves like f6, then we simply take and the g file gets opened. If you step back with your king here, then g6 is really a great move. You could maybe even get checked, but look at this. Black can continue with a couple of checks, but now we cover, and again the position is collapsing. So I'm showing you this line because maybe many of us would try now g takes f5, thinking, okay, now you don't have so many attackers that are dancing in front of black's king, but again, it's not working because the files will be opened with the g6 or f6. The dark square problem is there. There's also the problem of dark squares. There's also problem of light squares when this bishop gets activated, so black's pieces are too passive, so even in this line, it's not good for black. So that's why after knight to f5, Torch gave up now the bishop for this powerful knight on f5. Stockfish takes, and now Torch creates a very important breathing square for the knight, wants of course to maybe get the knight somehow back into the game. Stockfish continues with f takes g6. We have f takes g6, and now a great follow-up bishop takes g6. This is crazy stuff. What should you do? You cannot ignore it, of course. You cannot play moves like e takes f4 because you simply lose the rook. So that's why for bishop to g6, Torch took, and now f5. Great move. If you play king to f5, then actually you're running into a wild sequence. You can cover, of course, because you have to cover. There's simply no good square. If you try to go towards this side of the board, you will get checkmated. If you cover, then we play g6 through knight to f6. Look at this. This rook is coming into the game, and now after queen to f2, you would be checkmated here by the beautiful rook and queen's activity. So f5, after bishop to g6, king takes g6, f5, really great tactical sequence. You have to now step back, but again the pawns are rolling here like in the previous problem. For black, now Stockfish gets the queen into the game, wants to go for the h5 pawn. Now finally Stockfish grabs it, and if you watch now this position, Stockfish has a great compensation for the lost piece. 3 connected pass pawns. We have the endangered king on g7, so much better position here for white. We have now rook to e5, f6, king to h8, and now rook to f1, trying of course to let this pawns roll here on the king side. We have now queen to g8, we have f7 attacking the queen drops back here, and now queen to e2. Now Stockfish again wants to play maybe in some lines h5, g6, and similar ideas. We have now rook to f8, g6, you have to now make a reaction here, and Torch plays, I think, a really interesting move here, e3, which you see now why after a couple of moves again why Torch plays the move e3. Torch relies now on this passer, says show me what you got, take out now the knight, but let's see also different ideas. My Stockfish engine at home says you should go with b4, but I think in any of these lines, you're losing the game with the black pieces. Look at this. If you play b4, then a takes b4, c takes b4, we pick up the knight. The issue is now, after a couple of trades of pieces, you lose the queen, and you can just prolong the game, I think. Nothing spectacular gained here for black. Again, I think a completely losing game. Even if you try here knight to f6 to keep your knight in the game, then h5, you try maybe rook to h5, rook takes f6, and the rook is hanging. If you go, of course, with knight to f6, then you're getting destroyed here on the h file with rook to h2, rook to h1. Again, completely winning position here for white. So nothing is really working. After move g6, as I said, Torch says, I'll rely simply on this pawn on e3. Stockfish grabs now the knight on h7. We have queen to h7, and now there is the threat of queen to f6, even checkmate. So that's why queen to f7. Torch gives up now the rook, but just in order to let his pawn roll. So e3, really, I would say an interesting idea here by Torch, but now Stockfish plays a mean rook to f6 with the idea to play rook to h6 checkmate. That's why Torch has to cover now the h6 square. Stockfish gets now the rook back. E1, we have now rook takes e1, rook takes e1, and it seems so maybe that Torch is defending, but no, it's really a deep calculation here by the fish, because now the d6 pawn is weak. There is now the problem of the b5 pawn. Stockfish grabs now first of all this one and has now an extra pawn in a rook and pawn endgame, which in some lines could be playable, but still the d6 pawn is something that bothers me here. Torch tried rook to e2, king to b1. Now you attack. Stockfish grabs this one. Torch grabs now this one, but now the pawns are rolling. Even if you go with behind with rook to b3, the issue is after rook to c6, d6, and h5, d6 or h5 are possible moves. The position is simply too stretched. The king cannot, of course, compete on both sides, and the rook cannot compete against both of these pawns. The issue for black is that white king is close enough to the action and can compete against any of these pieces. So again, completely winning end here for Stockfish. So after move b6, we have now rook to a2. Stockfish, of course, gets the king closer, hides the king, delivers a check, goes now for this pawn. And now, after a couple more moves, Torch played even a bad move, rook to b1. But even if you try rook to b6, then this one is hanging and will simply cut off here. Black's king in some of these lines, push the pawn further. Again, it would be game over. But okay, the game was prolonged. The engines have to play till checkmate. Here, Stockfish covers, simply push the pawn further, goes with this one. Now, Stockfish went like this, traded off everything, and now promoted a new queen. And now, after a couple more moves, Stockfish found, of course, the fastest way to deliver checkmate here on g7 with the beautiful here pattern with the beautiful pawn and queen's activity. So, great game, great attack here by the fish, especially the beautiful tactics around the square f5, and then the sack on g6 followed with queen to c2. Really a great way to crack this fianchetto setup that black created in the later stage of the game. Really a spectacular game, and again, a deserved win here by Stockfish 17. As I mentioned, it was a pure domination by the fish against Torch in this 100th match of classical time format chess. So, okay, I hope that you enjoyed this game. I really enjoyed it a lot. Interesting ideas of the lion's jaw. If you want to see some other spectacular chess games like this, check out our commented chess games played by computer series here on my YouTube chess channel. Here's the link to the playlist. And if you like this content, hit the subscribe button. See you soon with some more videos. And what do we say in the end? Chess is the best, of course.